Hi, my pals, how are you doing? It is the showstopper, Mr. Leopard, and today I'm happy and encouraged and inspired to encourage you using the Word of God by discussing the whole subject of miracles. So, my discussion today is about how to attract big miracles. When I say big miracles, I simply mean that anything that you desire, any miracle that you desire that is a big deal to you. So somebody else might look at it as a small thing, but for as long as it's big to you, then it is big. Now, the other thing that I need to, simplify is that there are certain miracles that we are praying so hard about today. We are working so hard to achieve. We're doing everything possible, even praying and fasting and making all manner of sacrifices to make them become a reality today. Yet there are other miracles that were difficult before, but we have gotten to a point where we are content and have made peace with the fact that this ain't gonna happen, and we have moved on. But if these miracles were extended to us, we would be so grateful. We would take with both hands, or like the Kikuyu say, suck with both cheeks. So let's talk about miracles. And it is my submission that my study of both the Old and the New Covenant brings some synonymity, to the extent that there are certain parameters and certain dynamics and philosophical aspects of miracles that cut across both covenants. And these are some of the things that I would like to talk about. And they're very simple, they're not complicated things. Number one is that for you to be able to attract a big miracle, you need to settle your identity. You need to know who you are and whose you are. You need to know your place in God. You need to know how to approach God, so that you are able to approach God with the right premise, and you're able to approach God with the right attitude, and that attitude is which makes every other thing fall into place and flow the right way. So what exactly do I mean? I may need to give you a little bit of scriptural reference. Matthew 15 verse 21 through to 28. A certain Canaanite woman approaches Jesus, and Jesus is teaching and is with his disciples, and cries out loud and calls out Jesus, and the disciples try to push her aside. They even tell Jesus to tell her off, but Jesus says that I came because of the lost, such as this one. But now look, when the woman comes to Jesus, the kind of conversation that takes place is not very comfortable if you are subjected to that. But before I bring that discomfort, I need to explain anything. But you need to understand that even at the time of Jesus and at the point of his coming, he was coming for the Hebrew nation. He came to his own. And up until when he was to be taken up, and therefore giving the great commission that the gospel should now be preached up to the ends of the earth, and to all nations, up to the Gentiles, the gospel was for the Hebrews, and they denied Jesus, and then it was extended to us. And to justify this, beyond Pentecost, Peter is the first person who receives the first revelation to go and preach to the Gentiles. A white sheet in a dream comes, and there are a lot of reptiles, including unclean animals, and he is told, kill and eat. And he says, I cannot eat because they are unclean. And then the spirit in the dream tells Peter that you cannot call unclean what the Lord has sanctified, justified, and blessed. And then he goes to preach to the Gentiles. I can save you the details. And when he comes back, he's in trouble with the other apostles, and he has to explain, like a small 4-year-old, what really happened, how it began, how it went. And no sooner had he finished, understanding this particular dream, the people came, called him, he went with them, and then he preached, and there was an outpouring of salvation and the Holy Spirit, and then they agreed with him, and then the gospel continued going to the Gentiles. So a Canaanite was a Gentile in this case. That's why the story of the Samaritan woman asking, Jesus asking the Samaritan water, the woman says, you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan. How can this work out? But this is not the woman, the Samaritan woman that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Canaanite woman who came and asked Jesus that please come and heal my daughter who is demon possessed. And Jesus gives this, what would pass like a rude answer, and says, don't you know that the food of the children cannot be thrown out to the dogs? And this woman knows who she is. She is comfortable in her identity. She knows that she is a Canaanite, and she knows the prejudice. She knows the barriers. And she tells Jesus with that understanding that even the dogs do eat the remains of the crumbs and the leftovers under the feet of the master. And Jesus is astonished by this kind of faith, and the Bible records to say that immediately this agreement and congruence of perspective had been arrived at. The daughter was healed right at that particular moment. So my first point is that you need to know who you are. You need to know whose you are, and you need to know how all this plays out. So I'll give you the Old Covenant, Old Testament synonym, and that is 2 Kings chapter 4 from verse 1 to verse 5. The Bible records of a certain woman who was a wife of the sons of the prophet. So she was a widow. The husband was a prophet and had since died. So she comes to Prophet Elisha and says that my master, she reminds him, she like points fingers at him and says, that my husband was faithful and a faithful servant and served the Lord as a prophet, and he was a good man. But now see, the creditors are coming to me to repossess whatever collaterals that I had given, and if I'm not able to pay, which is actually the case and the status quo, they are taking my sons into slavery to repay for the value and the worth of the credit that I owe. So clearly, this woman knows who she is. She knows who she is. She knows the loss side that is bore when you are a prophet, when you are a servant. She knows her standing, her loss of standing. She knows that on account of being the wife of the prophet or a widow of the sons of the prophet, she has certain entitlements to the God that people talk about and the God that people believe. And she knows that she deserves better. And she approaches the prophet with this profound understanding that she actually deserves better. And that is what I am trying to bring up, that your identity is very important. Now, when we move beyond identity, you also need to have faith, because without faith it is impossible to please God. But faith has two functionalities. The first functionality of faith is what I would call spontaneous faith, that faith that comes from the moment, faith that comes in the heat of the moment. But there is also another aspect and element of faith which is continuous. It's a continuous participle of your expression of faith. So let me explain the two of them. Faith for the moment is when the woman with the issue of blood hears that Jesus is in town, and she knows that she can't let that moment go. Faith of blind Bartimaeus, who hears that Jesus is in town and says, I can't let the moment go. She shouts her lungs, he shouts his lungs out. It is in Zacchaeus, who climbs the sycamore tree because there's no way Jesus will be able to spot him, and so he decides to go to a vantage position. It's actually the aspect of positioning. The faith of the moment is faith of these fellas who have a paralytic, and they decide to carry this man and go break down the house, break the roof, and bring him down, lay him under the feet of Jesus Christ. So there is the faith for the moment. There is the spontaneous faith that calls you into action, whereby you are able to respond to the moment in faith, believing that it's going to be well for you and your miracle will come through. But there is also the continuous, the stable, continuous, constant faith, which is you believe that God is in charge of your life, God is in charge of your situations, and your modus operandi of how you think, how you act, how you do things. You do things the right way. You live righteously. You respond accordingly. You treat people well. You treat God well. You believe in God, and you continuously avail yourself, loving God and doing everything that is right, believing that God has your best interest no matter what. So we are talking about the kind of faith that Job exhibited, where he continued to be righteous and to be found righteous before God, irrespective of everything that bedeviled him and befell him. He did not alter his perception of God on account of the suffering that he was going through. But I want to give you a piece of scripture, which is the second, the same book of 2 Kings, and we are looking at chapter 4, but we are reading verse 8 going forward. We find the prophet Elisha again having an encounter with another woman. Now, this particular woman, she was a rich woman, and Elisha used to pass through that street regularly, and she would say, come in and eat. and then she would refresh the servant of God. And whenever he came in town, she had spoken to the husband that why don't we make a room, put a chair, put a bed, so that when the man of God is in town, he can always come in and stay. I would like the modern, the 21st century couple, wife, to go tell that to the husband. But that's not the topic here. I am saying that you need to bring your A game in your faith, whether it is an act of spontaneity or you are having your continuous, constant faith, because faith is the biggest bearing in the functionality of miracles. Jesus has always told his people that received miracles that your faith has made you well. Your faith has made you well. Your faith has made you. Even the centurion officer who said, I'm not worthy that you come under my roof, just say what Jesus said. I've not seen this kind of faith in Israel. And at that very hour, the servant of that particular man was healed. But the third and the last thing that has been constant in the dynamism of the receiving of big miracles is something that I call capacity. What is your capacity to receive your miracles? Because miracles are granted, you shall receive them. But then the magnitude of your miracle is dependent on the capacity, on the magnitude of your capacity to receive the very miracle. So still from 2 Kings chapter 4 from verse 8, in this particular case of this particular from verse 1 actually, the woman who was a widow and a wife of the prophets, Elisha responded to this particular woman by saying that what do you have? So again, your faith and your capacity have a relationship, and the relationship is that the prevalence, the prevailing of your miracle is also based on you acting upon that which is available to you. So it is both your faith in a process as well as your capacity within that particular person. Let me explain that blind Bartimaeus believed that Jesus would heal. That was his faith. But then his capacity was his ability to attract attention from Jesus. And so he was stopped. And the more he was stopped, he continued raising the decibels. Do you hear what I'm saying? The woman with the issue of blood, she believed that Jesus would heal. So she went where Jesus was, but it was no walk in the park. She had to keep fighting. She had to keep moving. So she had to expand her capacity to attract the attention of Jesus. And she had a faith. Her faith was that if only I would touch the hem of his garment. That was the object of her faith. So there is the faith, and then there is the object of your faith and the capacity of your faith. The faith was that Jesus would heal. The object of her faith was that if I could touch the hem of the garment, and the capacity of her faith was her drive and her ability to push through. Blind Bartimaeus, he had faith that Jesus was in town and Jesus could bring sight to him. The object was to shout, and the capacity was to shout the loudest and ignore the criticism. Zacchaeus, the faith was that Jesus would be able to meet him and attend to his soul that he may receive salvation. The object of his faith was that he would go beyond his limitation and climb a tree to get the attention of Jesus. And his ability to push forward, therefore, build the capacity of his chances and probability of being recognized by Jesus and therefore to be attended to by Jesus. So this particular woman had faith that he had his identity right. He had this faith that the prophet Elisha would fix this particular mess. And then he was asked, what do you have? He said, I have nothing but a little oil. So the little oil became the object of his faith. And it was upon this object of his faith that his capacity or her capacity was then tested, and the miracle happened. How did it happen? The prophet said, do this. Go get some buckets. Go get some jars. Go get some drums. Go get some barrels. And Go get your children and lock yourself up in a house. Get from the distractions and just be focused. And what you're gonna do is that you will then start pouring the little oil that you have, and God, your faith and the power of God is gonna multiply that particular oil. And you continue. When one is full, tell your children to move it aside and go to the next one and go to the next one. And they continued being filled and filled and filled and filled until the last time when she asked, bring me that other jar, and the children said there was no more jar. So there was no room for wastage, and the oil stopped. And then the prophet Elisha said, go sell, pay your debts, and live on the rest. So she had capital to move forward. In summary, what am I trying to say? Even the woman who entertained the prophet Elisha, not this widow now, the one who made an upper room, okay? After she had done her acts of righteousness as a continuous act of faith, of just being good and doing right and believing that, God is a good God, a merciful God, Elisha asked, what can I do for you? Can I mention your name to the king or to the army commander? And that's when I realized that it's important to have somebody who can mention your name to the king, somebody who can mention your name to that CEO, somebody who can mention your name to, whosoever. Well, one would say it's some form of favoritism. Let me not comment too much on that. But I'm saying that the prophet asked this woman whether she could do any favor. And the woman said, I really don't need much. And that confirms the kind of miracle that I'm talking about. These other fellows that I've been talking about, Zacchaeus, Bartimaeus, the woman with the issue of the blood, the miracle was a desperation of that moment. But this particular woman, she had made peace like Abraham. She was okay with the fact that she's not able to bear children. And when she is asked, what can I give you? She says, I need nothing. I live amongst my people and I lack nothing. But as she's walking away, Elisha says, this cannot go unrewarded. So Elisha asks Gehazi, who is his servant, what can we do for her? And Gehazi says, she has no child and the husband is old. I don't know what it means that the husband was old. The last time I checked, okay, let me get away from that. I don't want to distract you. And Elisha says, hey, mama, next year, at such a time as this, you will be holding a child in your hands. This woman did not even believe. She said, come on, man of God, please do not make God a liar. But it came to pass. So that is to mean that if you have the correct standing of your identity, you know whom you are and whose you belong to, then it means you can use that identity to activate your faith, either in continual constant of your life or in the heat of the moment when you are seized of an opportunity to receive your miracle. And then you can make a decision what your object of miracle would be. And this decision of the object of a miracle, it could be by yourself or by a third party, because in this case it is Elisha and it's actually Gehazi who then identified the need and the object of that particular miracle. But then what was the capacity of this miracle? The capacity of this miracle for the woman of oil is that the object of the oil was multiplied. For this other woman was that the fact that her virtue, her righteousness, her kindness, her acts of mercy, her hospitality were then the object that will reward her in reverse to give her what she did not have, which was a child. And so her hospitality became the object that will be used as the basis of reward, and then her gift or her miracle was a child, which is what she needed. I hope this helps you, that your identity is key, knowing who you are, knowing whose you are, that you are a child of God, you belong to God, and you are entitled to certain privileges, including rights before God, and you can approach God that way, not arrogantly, but out of the abundance of His mercy. And then, make use of what you have to relate with God. Make use of what you have to make sense of that particular conversation, and your miracle can always come through, whether it is a miracle that you desperately need at that particular point, or it's a miracle you have needed over a long period of time. Anyway, so God bless you. Shalom. It is Mr. Leopard, and let's keep having these conversations about our loving God, because everybody has a chance to receive a miracle, including the big ones.